Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. We are back on the dev server and we're having a look at the naval portion of the next major update, Storm Warning. There's quite a lot of blue water machines that are coming in, and also remember when it comes to naval, a lot of the time the naval portion is actually the weakest when the dev server first comes out, and then it gets stronger as more and more updates get added. So in this one, we're going to have a look at the vehicles that are on it, but there's always some stuff sat in the files. The first vehicle we're having a look at is for Germany, and it is the Z4 Zerstorer. You may actually recognize some of the parts of this vehicle because it's American. You have the 5-inch guns, which you can see right here, and also right here. They're labeled as 127mm 38 Mark 12s, and then also you have the 3-inch guns, which are the 76mm. There are 3 sets of dual-mounted ones, and also you have torpedoes. Now, the torpedoes are weird on this vehicle. You have the centrally mounted 5-stacker, which is the standard Mark 35 torpedoes, but then you have 2 Mark 44 ones, which are either side. So this is one of only a few vehicles in War Thunder that actually has different types of torpedoes as it's going around. The other part of it as well is this is actually from 1960. It's part of the Z1 class. To me, it looks very similar to some of the American ships that we have in the game, specifically stuff like the Fletcher, for example, and others that are around. This vehicle is at 4.3 though, and you'll find it at rank 2 in the German Blue Water Tech Tree. The other part of it that is kind of cool though is of course the 5-inch guns. Being these American powerhouses, they have a lot of different pieces of ammunition, whether you want to fire HE, the SP Commons, or the Standard Common, or even the HEVT, which are all incredibly powerful in their own right. The different torpedoes also have different speeds, with the Mark 44 having 56 kilometers an hour, the 35 having good old 50, but the major problem is the Mark 44 has a very short travel distance compared to the Mark 35. So I don't know how useful it's going to be in general for general warfare against other destroyers. The other cool part of it though is the 3-inch guns do have HEVT, which is quite nice, and generally I would say that's pretty good. It also does have access to depth charges, mortars. It has the Hedgehog on it, so you can also use that. You can see them on the front here in these 2 areas. One of the things I would actually mention about the torpedoes, though, and this is more of kind of like a pet peeve of mine, is since I play arcade, I rely on the torpedo reload. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a button to be able to remove a torpedo from the deck so you can get a reload on it. So you'll have to fire all of the torpedoes on one end, and then you'll have to fire the other one on the other side. Otherwise, they probably won't reload, which is super annoying. It does have the anti-fragmentation armor that you find on all of the American destroyers, giving them a little bit more tankiness, and also the internals are basically the same too, so this one will work incredibly well. It also has a search radar on it and a fire director that is incredibly good at what it does. So similar to the Wilkinson and vehicles like that, you'll be able to be super accurate with these 5-inch guns as quickly as you target an enemy. So watch out for this vehicle. It's probably going to be pretty good at 4.3, might even go up in BR. The next vehicle is a big boomer for the Soviets, which is actually of British origin. And also, I don't think it's fully finished. As you can tell, its kind of color is a little bit odd. This is the Archangelsk, or as it's also known, one of the Revenge class ships that was given to the Soviets by the British. So if I remember the story correctly, there was an Italian battleship that the Russians were supposed to get as kind of a war prize and also as training, but they didn't get it in time, so therefore the British lent them this machine to tide them over before they got their war prizes from the Italians. And then what ended up happening after that was the Russians eventually gave it back and saying they didn't really like the vehicle, there was a lot of issues with it, and it turned out that they didn't maintain it at all. So some of the big turrets were actually fused when the British got it back, and therefore they couldn't really do anything with it, so they ended up just selling it for scrap. So that's pretty much what went on. The vehicle itself has 4 dual-mounted 15-inch cannons. You have these two, which are sat here, and then also these two, which are on the back. You have a ton of AA on the vehicle too, so this isn't just kind of the standard early war battleship that you'll find from the good old British. Instead, it has access to a lot of 40mm guns on it. You can see here with the 40s back here, the quad, and then it even has the octo sets that you find on stuff like the London, which is really cool, and then even some 20mm that are around the place. I don't know the gun arc of this 20mm, but it can be very big on these vehicles. So yeah, you have a ton of different gun mounts, which is really nice, and even on top of that you have some 4-inch guns, which you can see here, and some 6-inch guns that are there too, plus the big old 15 inches. So you have a little bit of everything. Here are the 6-inch guns at the bottom in the little panels. So this vehicle has just a ton of random armaments all over the place, which is pretty cool. And of course, the standard 15-inch guns have access to the CPC shells and the APC shells, giving it good penetration, not a great fire rate, but pretty bog standard compared to everything else that is here. This is also a way of being able to give the Soviets another battleship, because of course during this time they weren't exactly building a lot of them. That's why you have stuff like the Kronstadt in the game, that's why you have stuff like the Ismail, but now you actually have a vehicle that was built, was used, and was obviously pseudo-serviced. So you have an armor belt of 330mm here, you have 330 on the front of the turrets and 279 on the sides, plus a bunch on the ammo elevators themselves. The guns actually sit pretty high when it comes to these ammo elevators, but luckily the ammo sits pretty low, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Only has one funnel on it, and also a fire director that is standard for this type of vehicle. So nothing hugely to write home about here, apart from the fact it's another battleship that's coming to the Soviet tech tree at the end of the line after the Novorossiysk. The British also get a big boomer, and this one is really cool. You know how we got the Dunkirk, and the Dunkirk has the quad turrets at the front of it and not really much else behind? Well, welcome to a British vehicle that is similarly set up. This is the HMS Rodney, and it is part of the Nelson class of battleships. And basically what the HMS Rodney is something that has a lot of firepower on the front of it, but pretty decent second armaments. You can also see a lot of the naval vehicles right now are not fully there in terms of what their weapons are. They're a bit all over the place, which is not great, but it can or it will get fixed over time, so you don't have to worry about it too much. A lot of it is front-loaded in terms of the main guns, but on the back you also have quite a lot of stuff too. So the main guns here are these ones. They are 406mm, which I believe are 16-inch cannons. It has 3 sets of triple-mounted ones. The ammo itself is sat very low in this, and then they also have ammo elevators that are not fully modeled. Also, like the Dunkirk, there is quite a lot of armor on the front of this machine. You can see 100mm here, and then also you have some 80mm on the front. I feel like actually, never mind, that's pretty low for this. Are we actually showing the full armor? Maybe this is just what it is. This seems incredibly low for a battleship, but at least it has some really nice, you know, guns on it, and the ammo is so low it's going to be quite hard to detonate it. The other part is all of the secondary guns that you have on the back. So you have these guns, which are here, the 152s. These are the 6-inch cannons set in these turrets on the side. So that's your secondary armament. You also have the 120mm here, which I believe are the 4-inch guns. These are dotted around all over the ship as well. So you have sets of those, and then you have even the quad and octo mounts of the 40mm, the 2-pounders that you can see here on the back for some AA support. So they do have access to AA guns, they do have access to secondaries, they do also have access to the big guns. And these guns are quite nice. The 406mm, you have a HE shell, 67 kilos of explosive mass, which are quite nice. And then also you have an APC-BC, which has 23 kilos of explosive mass with nearly 700mm of penetration, The only problem I have with these turrets is you have, I think it's called is it a super firing or something like that turret up here. So this means that you can fire both of these going forward, but you have this third turret where you're going to have to angle the machine to be able to fire off the guns on the side, which obviously isn't as good. The actual vertical guidance and the horizontal guidance is actually not bad. You can see the vertical there being 10 degrees per second, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're looking at a vehicle like this, that's actually not that bad. And obviously the reload for the large guns isn't exactly the best either, so that is a bit of a problem. You do get the Walrus though, and who doesn't love the Walrus? I love the Walrus. I think it's great. The next vehicle is for Italy, and you got the Ghibli. This is the RN Ghibli. It's the only coastal vehicle that we have which is sat around here, and you can find it before the Albatross and after the Gabbiano. Now, the Ghibli is part of the Cyclone class, which I don't think we've actually had a Cyclone before, but it's very similar to some of the other frigate-type vehicles that are around the case. It is labelled as a gunboat and does have two single-mounted 100mm Otto Mod 1937 cannons. It also has these weird dual 20mm Breda guns, which are kind of like vertically mounted. Usually most guns are horizontally mounted, but these ones are like offset vertically mounted, which has always just made me uncomfortable, just because it just looks so weird on them. Like you can see it here where it's set up. So you have one which is slightly angled above and also to the side. Very odd. It also has some Scotti Isotta Fraccini 20mm too, and also some torpedoes on the side, two specifically, which are sat here. So these are just the W200 torpedoes, nothing to write home about, not great range, not great speed, everything is fair. And then the 100mm, you get only two of them, and they either fire HE, APHE, or HETF. So depending on what you fight, this thing won't be able to output a lot of damage, but the question is, how survivable is it? Because it has quite a lot of crew, 154 overall, doesn't have a ton of armor, but will it get something that's similar to a destroyer damage model, or will you get something which is similar to, you know, something like the Fairmile, where it'll just get pieced up and annihilated? My guess is it will be pretty survivable even without a lot of armor, and hopefully people can get the 100mm firing. Of course, you can overpressure people with these types of guns and just bonk a donk and bang, which is great. So that is overall pretty nice. And then you have the central area with, of course, the radio station, the bridge, and the fire director too. So this thing won't be able to measure the distances and won't be able to give you the leading target marker, because it's technically not in the blue order tree and also not labeled as like a destroyer. Instead, it's a gunboat, but you still should be able to be accurate with these guns in quite a large way. The major issue I would say for a vehicle like this is actually torpedoes against some of those faster coastal machines that you're going to run into, and also what spawn this thing's going to get. If this thing gets a destroyer spawn, it's instantly useless. If it gets other spawns, might be useful. The last machine that we have for naval is the Glalissoniere. This is a French cruiser that is coming in and basically makes the best of both worlds. Chill it out, take it slow, then you rock out the show. The great thing about the Glalissoniere is it takes the guns that you find on one of the other blue water machines, which is the Emile Bertin, which is right here. The 152mm, the triple mounted ones, and then it actually adds armor to the vehicle, so that will help it out quite a lot. You can see here you got 100mm on the front of the turrets, 95 here, 70 around the ammo elevators, and also 105mm around the waterline, which will hopefully serve it very well. You have the ammo down here, you have the ammo over here, and then of course the engines in the center along with the transmissions, and the 90mm as secondaries alongside the 152s, plus the 37s and 13.2s, which aren't very good at AA support. The main reason why I like stuff like the Emile Bertin and will enjoy the Glalissoniere is because you have these 152s, and for me they just do a lot of damage with the melanite that they have as the explosive type, giving it good penetration, good TNT equivalent, and generally very good damage. And if you want extra penetration, you're going to be able to face anything and penetrate it with the APC-BC rounds and still do nearly a kilo of TNT equivalent on each of the rounds. The HE also has a ridiculous amount of TNT equivalent on it too, which is super good. So from a secondary point of view, the vehicle will be nice with the 90s, but everything else, like the torpedoes, are just the standard 23 DTs, which by this point are not great. I mean, they're still usable, but you know, you hardly have any of them on the machine. But the major guns will be good. Everything else should be okay with it, apart from the secondary armaments that are very weak. You'll find the Glalissoniere after the Emile Bertin and before the Bretagne, so that's where it ends up in the place. That is all of the naval vehicles that, at least right now, are on the dev server. But as I said, naval is one of those areas where usually they don't show everything on the first dev server. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.